Добрий день.
Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us in Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform. My name is Olga Atamanova. Now we will be talking about blocking our borders. We will be talking about the current situation over there and the waves out of this situation. Joining us online is Volodymyr Balin, Vice President of the Association of International Road Carriers of Ukraine. Good afternoon, Mr. Volodymyr. Good afternoon. Mr. Volodymyr, so starting from the 6th of November, the Polish transporters blocked 3 checkposts, and starting from Thursday, they started blocking yet another checkpost. So what do we know about this situation for the time being? Well, unfortunately, nothing have changed other than the blocking has started on Shahini Medika checkpost. The official message now is that it will be blocked 24/7, so no more than one vehicle will be let through within 24 hours. Oh, Mr. Volodymyr, what is the size of the lines? What is the waiting time on the borders? There are news that the line on one of the borders is already reaching the length of 30 kilometers, and an average waiting time is 127 hours. Well, according to the information that we have, there are around 600-700 vehicles in Dorohutske, Drebelne, and Korchove checkposts. So it's 600 to 700 vehicles. Part of those vehicles are being led through, another part of those vehicles are already leaving to cross through other checkposts. Some vehicles were driven to the parkings, and they said that their vehicles will be staying in Poland in parking grounds as long as the situation will persist. In Shahini, the line was really more than 1,000 vehicles, and today it increased significantly because before Thursday the checkpost was operating, letting about 250 vehicles per day. Now its capacity decreased significantly, which resulted in accumulation of vehicles in the line. So bringing the vehicles to other checkposts means bringing them to the border with other country, which results in necessity of additional supplementary customs documents. I don't think that for many vehicles it can be the case. I know that many vehicles are trying to cross the border in the checkpost of Chop, and also we know the importers who use the vehicles to bring the food products through Romania. We know that this situation is already at stop level. It's been discussed by everybody. There is a statement by the President Zelensky who said that some time is needed to find solution. In your opinion, what are the additional measures that we should take? What else should we do to solve this problem? Are there any prospects that this situation will be solved shortly? Well, there are 3 main components here, in my opinion. Well, basically 4 of them. If we agree blindly with those requirements of the strikers, it may be a 4th option, but what they require is unacceptable for both economy of Ukraine and transporters in Ukraine, and I hope that none of the government officials in Ukraine is inclined to even consider such an option. Well, talking about what has to be done, the government works in 2 areas. First of all, they work with the European Commission, and in coordination with the European Commission, they appeal to the government of Poland, saying that there is a violation of a number of international agreements, including EU agreement between Ukraine and Poland, and all those violations are supposed to be documented, and such documentation will result in cancellation of permit for strike. Also, the Ministry of Infrastructure collects information about violations committed by the strikers and hands them over to the authorities of Poland to have the strike permit cancelled again. And yet another option that we're resorting to is hiring of lawyers by the Association of Road Carriers, and those lawyers currently talk with the authorities again to cancel the permit for the strikes due to multiple violations by the strikers. If such decision will not be taken, we will contest it in court. So the last option is the one exercised by businesses. The previous two are those exercised by the government, and everybody keeps working on their areas. Well, and touching upon the information policy, I was talking to my colleagues and I realized that today's Polish politicum doesn't completely understand what's going on in the border. Only those Polish businesses realize it who suffer losses, because a lot of Polish companies have cooperation with Ukrainian companies, and those blockades result in losses for them, and they're ready to get involved to have the permit for strikes cancelled under court proceedings. But those who don't have any cooperation with Ukrainian importers or manufacturers, consumers, it seems to them that really Polish cargo transporters are right, that they complain for the Ukrainian transporters, that they restrict their capabilities in the European market. So first of all, it's a pure manipulation, and secondly, unfortunately, those narratives are being pronounced by the Polish government officials and some businessmen who don't clearly understand the situation. This is why I think that it's a huge area of work there. We have to reinforce our information influence on media space of Poland to prove that, first of all, the strikers lie to the society. Why do they lie? Because they want to bring the permits for Ukrainian drivers back so that they have restrictions while entering Europe. And they said that there is competition between Polish and Ukrainian cargo carriers, and thus Polish carriers lose their market share. However, the agreement between Poland and Ukraine contemplates that any cargo carrier can pick up a cargo in country other than country of its registration and bring it to any other country. Meanwhile, Ukrainian drivers cannot pick, or Ukrainian cargo carriers cannot pick cargo in any country of European Union because it requires additional permits that they really do exist in Ukraine, but the maximum what our cargo carriers can do within a year is not more than 100,000 trips. So the Polish, they have 320,000 vehicles alone, so those are incomparable figures. Are we ready to communicate on an expert basis? Yes, we are. Let me tell you that when there was a discussion in May, there was a block, and it was not on such a large scale. That there was a week delay in Barakuska. The checkposts were not closed, so we had a discussion with ÖBD. It's an association that did not support the strikers, but on Friday, after our communication online, they said that they are ready to support the strikers. So all the Polish business work under the regulation 1071, which contemplates professional competency by cargo carriers. And we say that this regulation should be implemented in Ukrainian legislation, but we also said that we have a draft law developed in Ukraine, which would make sure that Ukrainian cargo carriers comply with the licensing requirements of the European Union. Also, with the beginning of the war, the government had to adopt a decision to simplify the licensing process significantly, and now we get a lot of new licenses who are entitled to live abroad, but they do not comply with the licensing requirements of the European Union, and we appeal to the Ministry of Infrastructure to have this simplification cancelled because it lost its actuality. Also, in May, Polish strikers required that only the drivers which comply to Euro 4 standard can be entering Europe. But we are ready to use Euro 5 and Euro 6 standard cars, so we can negotiate it. We can negotiate it with the governments and say that we are ready to work under the rules. However, at the same time, we are being accused of some violations, that there was some additional number of problems. And we were asking our colleagues, what were the violations that you were documented? But we know that there is the inspection who appealed to all the government authority, who was talking to all of the cargo transporters of Ukraine to tell them whether they were able to provide loading for Ukraine cargo carriers. I don't think that there were multiple texts of this. I think that it's an ephemeral situation here. In my opinion, part of the cargo transporters, they really want to have some improvements of electronic queue for themselves. It's a huge discussion around there, but we are ready to maintain this discussion. But part of those strikers, they stay there because they're being paid for that, and they will stay there just as long as Moscow keeps paying for this, because in the end of the financial year, Ukraine is as its knees. All the export-import operations exercised using the automobile transport are blocked. Importers, exporters, Ukrainian economy, everybody loses. But let's emphasize it once again, Polish economy loses too, and we hope that eventually this information will reach Polish politicians, and I have an impression that Polish politicians retain this problem for the new government, so the new government has something to do, and they, as the opposition, will just criticize their actions. Mr. Volodymyr, do I understand it correctly that mostly our transporters work exclusively to cover our internal needs of our internal market? Well, let me tell you something. What the Polish say and those 5 supporting associations. Let's get back to the permits. On Friday, when we were talking to our colleagues, we've heard the clear response. Why do they need it? They say that we cannot go to you because there is a war going on, and they accuse us of having 95%, so they don't come because they're not being invited. They are invited, but the permits will not allow them to enter. It will not protect you against enemies' drones or rockets or any other maladies that may happen in the state waging a war. So what our neighbors cargo carriers want? They want us to pick up cargo from Ukraine, bring them to the hubs in Poland, Slovakia and Romania, Czech Republic and Hungary, then unload them there, and those cargo carriers in Europe will carry them across Europe, and we will wait in those same hubs for the cargo being brought from other countries of Ukraine to bring them to Ukraine. Excuse me, but that's when, you know, when the Polish came to the European market, it resulted in bankruptcy of some French and German companies. They were very aggressive in their market. They killed the European market with their demand, and now they want to prevent us from coming to this market by killing us. Them as the cargo carriers of the young Europe, and for them we are the third type of transporters. We have our markets, we have cargo carriers who carry cargo to Italy, Finland, Germany for years, so we don't claim the markets in European Union. We just want our markets to retain, and to work there in European Union markets we are supposed to have licenses provided by European Union. We have very little number of such vehicles, only 5,000 of them for the next year. This is our quote for the next year. Not all of them are staying in Europe all the time. On top of that, there is a rule that you have to come to the European Union from Ukraine, and after 2 trips you have to come back to Ukraine. That's a rule which is very strictly controlled by the competent authorities of the European Union. So we are no competition in the European markets. Our percentage is very low there, our share, market share. We cannot work there legally, and illegally we will just not going to do it. You know that they can strike against making a company with Ukrainian capital in Poland, because this represents competition. Yes, but if there was a requirement not to register companies with Russian and Belarusian capital, that was clear. But talking about Ukrainian capital, you know, the conditions were quite favorable by the government of Ukraine to have our cargo carriers registering the companies in Poland. That's true. And there is also Article 65 of the European Union Agreement that says clearly about any prohibition of moving of capital. So how can they neglect the EU agreement so aggressively? Meanwhile, Poland is a part of European Union. There's a lot of questions here because they may be not quite aware of the legal documents, specifically talking about situation with Ukraine, the way the electronic queue operates here. I've seen a lot of their desires. They were saying like, let's open a line in Yagodin for empty vehicles. We're not against. So now 4 of them are operating in Yagodin. So why would they say let's open another ones? They just don't understand what's really going on. According to our information, they were working for Belarus and Russia previously. Now they were not able to reorient their business for European markets, and now they come to strike and make some money in the border with Ukraine. Mr. Volodymyr, I wanted to touch upon another important topics. What are the consequences of this block? And we understand that they have global consequences for economy, for whole of the country, but talking about transporters, what are the consequences that you observe now already? What are the losses resulting from all these circumstances? Well, I cannot count the losses of every single transporter. Someone is in the line, someone is forced to send another driver due to the death of a driver. Someone is going to the court with us to compensate the losses, but it's gonna happen later when we can prove that this strike is illegal. And some are just waiting for the border to be unblocked because those trucks in line, they're in line, they don't make any money. For our cargo carriers and for our importers and exporters, everybody understands where we end up. Whether they would compensate it, it's a philosophical question, but the losses are 350 euro per truck per day. Everything that was not made is under received revenue. So what transporters, cargo carriers talk about? that something that is manufactured in Ukraine and which is brought to Europe, the consumers, they say, we will be looking for new manufacturers in other countries because they understand the logistics. Logistics from Ukraine is unclear now. 10 years in, 10 days in line plus time to achieve the destination. It's a huge problem. It's a problem for our manufacturers who won't be able to enter into agreements for the next year, and is the problem of cargo carriers. So the situation is critical from strategic point of view. Thank you very much for this conversation. And the last question about a possible compromise. You mentioned that accepting the conditions of the strikers is no solution to this problem. So what can be a compromise here? Well, it's very easy here. First of all, talking about permits, I think that the compromise will be the implementation of European cargo transportation market in Ukraine. I think that everybody should agree with it, both our government and Polish government, and first of all, the Polish cargo carriers. Talking about the electronic line, they were offered a real algorithm. There is the checkpost Ukraine-Algabucha. It's in Polish territory, established in 2014. It can technically accept cargo trucks without cargo. And we even accept that if this decision will be taken, let the Polish only trucks go there even without cargo. Another compromise with regard to the electronic queue is a little bit more complicated, but it's still viable. We were emphasizing it to our ministry multiple times, even before the strikes, that in Ugrinie and Zhinkovich we can stop registration or previous registration of cargo trucks in those checkposts where the empty trucks go. So to stop previous registration or preliminary registration of the vehicles, but they should be documented only as they arrive. So like as you arrive, you already realize that you're being led through. So there is no electronic queue. There is a live queue, which option is technically available. It works for buses coming to and from Poland and to Ukraine. But when these two compromises were discussed and offered to the to Polish strikers, half of the strikers were agreeing. Meanwhile, the other half was not agreeing. They were saying no, only the permits. And before you sign a memorandum that you revert to the permits, starting from the 1st of January, we are staying here. So the ones who win here is Moscovia. Meanwhile, Ukrainian and Polish economies lose. Thank you very much for this information. Thank you for joining our broadcast. Joining us was Volodymyr Balin, the Vice President of International Cargo Carriers of Ukraine. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Our team is working on the schedule for tomorrow, so follow our announcements. Thank you for staying tuned. Let's continue working for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.